Hello, Speech 1315, and welcome to Chapter 10 of this course over the body of the speech. Now, what is the body of the speech? This is basically the meat of your entire speech. Now, when you're creating the body or creating your speech, everybody thinks that you should start with the introduction and the conclusion. But in reality, you should probably start with the body and understanding what you're going to talk about so that it then influences what you write for your introduction and your conclusion. Most seasoned presenters and speakers actually start with the body to help influence the intro and the conclusion. So it's important that with the body that you start with a specific purpose. So what is your overall goal for the speech? So for this speech, it's to inform my audience of the ways in which some fake pills are sold to the public. That's the main goal. It's never going to change, but that's the goal. You then devise a central idea from that main goal, which my central idea is that some dishonest pharmaceutical companies use tricks to make fake pills seem legit. So let's read that in sequence. So the specific purpose is for me to inform my audience of the ways in which some fake pills are sold to the public. And the main idea is that some dishonest pharmaceutical companies use tricks to make fake pills seem legit. Now, or central idea, my apologies, not main idea. That's the central idea. But from that central idea, we now have main points to support that central idea. So the first main point is that these companies concoct a drug name that sounds like a real drug. And then you select that main point. So this is my main point. And then my other main point is they use fancy packaging and set high prices to give an aura of another expensive drug. With both of these main points, okay, main point 1 and main point 2, we need to find supplemental material that supports our claim. So the best way to think about this is 3 steps. It's claim, data, warrant. So you make your claim, such as pharmaceutical companies use fancy packaging to set prices to a high rate. My data is research conducted by Dr. Allard in 2024 found that 50 of the 100 large name brand pharmaceutical companies use fancy packaging to increase their pricing. That's the data. Warrant is your summarization, which we'll come to here in a minute, but it basically summarizes your claim saying this shows that, or based on this data, this supports that pharmaceutical companies make their packaging really pretty so that they can raise the prices. But in order to get to that warrant, you have to have supporting materials. Some forms of supporting materials are statistics, such as data, examples, such as real life examples that you've experienced or you've witnessed, testimonials, and narratives, such as stories. When you are creating the body, I like this visual just because the outline that I give is so cut and dry, and it's almost like a fill in the blank, whereas maybe this will resonate with more students, just because you can visualize how the speech is being built. So you have your central idea right up here, right? And then under each of your central ideas, you have main point 1 and main point 2. And under those main points, you have your supporting data to support that main point, which then supports your overall arching central idea. How do you devise main points? The first thing that I must stress here is that you don't want more than 3 main points. You want to keep it pretty concise with what you are discussing. So pick 2 or 3 main points that you will discuss. Restrict each main point to a single idea. So you don't want to combine ideas into one main point. So let's say I have 6 main points and I'm like, oh, I'll just combine 3 and 4 and make that one main point. Keep it very specific, one sentence like we saw right here regarding fancy packaging, right? You could even put fancy packaging leads to higher pricing by pharmaceutical companies. Notice I didn't say name concoction and packaging. You keep those 2 separate. So just make sure that each main point has a single idea. Avoid announcements when devising main points. So you don't want to say like, I'm going to discuss tourism in space. Bleh, right? Bland, boring. You want to say something a little bit better, such as tourism in space will become frequent by the year 2040. That's a claim, right? That's a main point that someone may have that they want to discuss. Then they would follow that up with supporting ideas. It's important that you devise your main points to be accustomed to your audience members. I discussed this in a previous chapter within the book, but for example, if you're giving a speech about space to a group of 30-plus-year-olds versus a speech about space to kids on a river, the way you present will be very different. So make sure that you customize your main points for your audience members. When organizing your main points, there's a couple of different tactics that you can use. There's the chronological pattern where you talk in chronological order. So it would be weird to talk about what's happening in 2009 and then going all the way back to, you know, King James. It may make sense in some speeches, but if you want to speak in chronological order, this is a tactic of organizing your speech. Then there's spatial patterns where you discuss your speech from top to bottom. So for example, I'm talking about the meat of the speech, which is kind of in the middle, but then in the next couple of videos, I'll talk about the introduction and the conclusion. So these are kind of spatial recognition things. I decided to talk about the body first because, again, we need to know about the body before we can reach the intro and the conclusion. Similarly, we start from the bottom to get to the top or the top to get to the bottom, depending on what your topic is. And that's called a spatial organizational pattern. Then there's the cause and effect pattern, where because of this, we're going to have this. So because we are not recycling very well, we will see global warming effects, right? Similarly, we could go the opposite way and go effect and then cause. So we could say, hey, we're having global warming effects. What's the cause of this? And then our whole speech is about what's causing global warming. So those are two additional organizational patterns. For example, you can see the strong economy leading to increased spending. We can say because there's a strong economy, the impact is going to be increased spending. But similarly, we could say increased spending leads to a strong economy. So it's really important to be mindful of which organizational pattern you're wanting to go with. Another organizational pattern is the problem solution pattern, where we find a problem and we discuss the solution. So poverty is a problem. A potential solution is increasing minimum wage. Then there's a topical pattern where it's just kind of like a high-level overview of it. So minimum wage, we talk about all the things that go into minimum wage from different viewpoints of it, such as federal, state, and city. Another important part about the body is supplying transition sentences. I believe I've talked about this in previous videos, and I'll always talk about them. It's super important to let your audience members know where you're headed and where you're going. So think of it as like a bridge. You're bridging the gap in between two concepts, AKA two main idea points, right? So for example, at the beginning, we were talking about pharmaceutical sales. And one of the main points was that drug companies will put really fancy pharmaceutical names on vitamin C, right? Like very mundane supplements. But then another one is that they will lead to pharmaceutical companies will have packaging that is fancy, and that's why they will increase the pricing. Well, how do we get to both of those concepts, right? So that's a transition sentence. You'll talk about the names, you'll have a transition and say like, not only do they have fancy names to help increase the pricing of these drugs, but they also use packaging. Boom, we've now bridged into another sector, into the main, or another main point of the central idea of your speech. So bridges, here are a couple of examples. One, now that we have examined the problem of poverty, let's turn our attention to one solution. That's a transition. Another one is, more than 300 years after King James established the first minimum wage, the United States adapted its first minimum wage. So we are now transitioning from talking about King James to the United States. It's also important to have internal summaries. These are the warrants that I was talking about. So in an upcoming episode or video, you're gonna see that I'm gonna talk about conclusions. These are like mini conclusions. You're just helping the audience members recap what you discussed. So these internal summaries just are recaps for your audience members. So you might say, as noted, the first minimum wage was established in 1938 at 25 cents. Since then, it has been increased 22 times. So you can summarize some main points. You can summarize what you just talked about, but essentially these are also transitions within your speech. Signposts, I like to think of TikTok when I think of these. So these are just major signs to help your audience members follow what you're saying. So for example, I'm going to tell you 3 ways that you can become a better presenter. These are signposts, right? That help your audience members know what's coming up and where they're going. So me saying I have 3 tips for you to become a better presenter, you now know as an audience member that I'm about to talk about 3 different tips. So if I go over or under, you're gonna catch it, right? And so these are considered signposts, and those are transitions within your speech as well. Spotlights are kind of like what they seem. They're just spotlights on main points that you want to reiterate within your speech. And then finally, a tip for your career before we conclude this presentation is to test and verify your material and your transitions. This goes along with practicing, but you can practice with yourself, but it's also important to practice with other individuals. When I was in grad school and I had to give presentations, I can't tell you how many times my classmates and I would get together and just practice our speeches before the big speech day. And it really helped us get feedback and understand what we need to do, because a lot of times you'll have habits or you'll be doing something that you don't even realize that you're doing. So it's important that you always practice with someone else that you trust and will give you honest feedback on how you're doing. That is all for this chapter. Hopefully you know a little bit more about how to construct the body of your paragraph, and I look forward to seeing all of your outlines improve based off of this video. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.